Hello, Dr. Dan. This is our Lab 2 video for where we're connecting our server and client on our LCD, and we're playing the dog game. And Michael will start with our first few lines of code. Go.
Okay, so initially we're just defining the build server, and then we're getting our import statements, and then we're actually in line 12, we're going to our definitions. Pretty basic there. And then through 17 through 21, we're just initializing the server and we're globalizing it. And then we're also initializing the parameters, the dot parameters within the local server in lines 23 through 26. Then moving on with the actual client, we're getting the dot parameters, we're making them red, and then we're receiving them via the Bluetooth and writing it. And then we're also initializing our game state variables, such as game over, we're initializing that to false. And then the game start time, the collision time, and the collision threshold. And then in the collision threshold, we're actually making that just 20, and that's in pixels. And then for the void warp local dot, this it's actually setting it to a random location to begin. And then we're getting the random location from the X and Y coordinates through those two lines of code. And then through the Bluetooth server callbacks on line 43, that's where we're actually receiving the callback from the Bluetooth connection, and then we're receiving it from the server. And then we're also we're calling out if it is connected and disconnected, and then we're doing that through the Boolean statement device connected. And then moving on to line 56, these are the characteristic callbacks. And then on right is actually to capture the client's dot position. So with the initialized dot position that we got from the two local X and Y variables with the random in lines 38 through 40, we're actually using that here to actually get that position and in order to communicate that to the other Bluetooth device. And then on line 69, we're going through the setup, and then this is where we're actually initializing the whole screen and actually putting things to the Bluetooth device. And then we're actually going to initialize the Bluetooth device as the server with the broadcast name. And here, that's kind of what's happening there. And um, it's kind of like all pretty basic. And then in line 60 or 86, we're actually adding characteristics. And then we're doing the advertising directly after that in lines 91 through 94. Then moving on to lines 98, that is the actual floating distance between the two dots. And here we're taking in those parameters. And then we're getting float values for that. And then we're turning the square root of it. And then lastly, in at on line 104, this is the actual draw game function where we're initializing the screen to black, and then we're filling in the circles. Um, yeah, so we're initializing the circles on the two devices, and then we're setting the cursor color to white and then the size, and then we're printing out some communication to the user. And then the last function that I will be covering is the void draw game over. And this is where we initialize the screen to black after the game has ended. Then we're initializing the cursor, and then the text color is red. And then that's what we will print onto the actual screen, game over. And that's what will let the user know that the game is over.
All right, I will be walking through the loop. So here in our loop, we are running our update function for the M5 Core 2, and then we check our do connect Boolean, and then we attempt connection to the server using connect to server, and then we set our do connect Boolean to false with a delay, and then we check if device is connected and if game over is false, and then we set our variables for our touch offsets, and then we get our touch point, and then we define our X and Y offsets from the center. And then we check if we move outside the dead zone. And if that's the case, then we constrain X with the bounds that we've chosen and then Y with the same bounds. And then for button A, we check if the cycle move step size is greater than the max step. And then we check for button B to warp it to a random position using warp local dot. And then we also have our collision detection as well using our distance between function. And then we also send our local dot coordinates to the server. And this is using our characteristic that we're writing. And then we run draw game. And then we check if the game's over. And if that's the case, then we display game over screen. And then we clear the screen when it's disconnected, set our text position, our text color, show our message, and then we restart the scanning. And then we have our client code. So we're including a couple imports, and then we are setting our BLE definitions for our characteristic and our service. And then we're also setting our broadcast name similarly. And then we are also defining our objects, our advertisers, and a couple Booleans. And then we are also setting our dot parameters similarly that we did in the server code. A lot of this is very similar to the server code. And then we are also setting our dot parameters that we receive from our notifications. And then we are also defining some variables like game over, start time, collision time, and the threshold. And then we're defining our client callbacks for connecting and disconnecting to the client. And then that's about it. Oh, so we do also have a notify callback function. So this just sends the coordinates as a string, and it uses our BLE characteristic to do that.
Hello, I am going to share my side of the code that I've done for this project and also like show the demo. But my teammates Eric and Michael have gone through the project. I just after they made the video, I made some changes because there's a little bugs going on, and I was the one tasked with showing the demo and everything, so I noticed some lags and some codes. So what I did was in our first video we had in the videos that we've watched, we had our server and client code in one big code, and every time we were running it, we would comment out if it's for the client or if it's for the server. But what I did was I split them because I was noticing a lot of like problems and stuff like that, and it was also not reading the joystick. So in the first code, it was really not moving. It was just displaying the dots. It was connecting, but just displaying the dots. I'll go over the code again, and then just explain what everything is happening here. Again, like we've seen, these are like the libraries that we are calling for, the Adafruit, for what the wire connection, the Core2 obviously here, and then we have the Bluetooth functions, we have the gamepad definitions here, we have our Adafruit, like methods here, and then we have our BLE server definition where we have our UID here just to connect with the server and the client, and we have our broadcast name for the Bluetooth. We have here some variables and, just some general variables that we've been using from our labs, from our previous lab as well, just to show that the blue dot and the red dot is like controlled by which client or which server, and just receiving the positions, everything. And then we have here our callback method that checks if it's connected or if it's disconnected if with Bluetooth. Also, this was also provided to us in our callback, and in our BLE characteristic callback class that was given to us in phase 3. And then we have our broadcast server for how our server is sending signals to find any connections or like to host these connections and initializing its position. Initially, again, yes, this is also something that was happening in the first code. Every time like the game started, there was a possibility that they were collided. they were, and then it would immediately, like within seconds, it would say, I think I have a video of it I can show. It would immediately say that game over because they've collided, stuff like that. But yeah, so that this is fixing that. And then we have our like draw game where we are initializing where the dots are starting and stuff like that. Here it's just drawing it onto the LCD. So going back to our setup, we are initializing our gamepad. And then this is some debugging code to check if there is any gamepad connected. Yeah, and then we are initializing our starting positions of where the red and the blue dots are starting. We always want them to start in the same position so that we ensure they don't start colliding and then the game doesn't, end. And then we're initializing our Bluetooth to receive. And I mean, for the server, it is, searching for a BLE. And then yes, Bluetooth, it's broadcasting here, and then this is just displaying onto the LCD. And then we have our loop method, where we are updating our M5 to just check for new connections. And then here we are initializing and setting that game has started. Here it's if the game is not over, read game pad joystick for blue dot movement. So it is checking like for any movement of the blue dot. And then it's just like initializing here and then checking the speed and everything. And then yeah, it's just like, checking it's not touching anything. And then if it's like pressed, the buttons are pressed and it's setting for the movement. And then yes, here also it is it's an if statement that is checking if the client is like moving, if its position has changed and everything, and notifying it back over. And then here is that if there is a collusion, it's gonna display that the game is over, and it's also displaying how much time it took before the collusion happened. And then yeah, it's just disconnecting here. If any of those things are not happening, that means it is disconnected, and just resetting it, and then we're just delaying it so that we have a smooth transition. Yeah, this is for the server side. The client side is again, pretty much similar. What's different is that the server is searching for connections, and the client is the one that's being hosted onto the server. There are some difference here and there, but that is the main difference that we have here. But yes, and I hope you enjoyed the demo. There is some bugs here and there, but overall, this was a very cool project. It's giving us some ideas that what we could do for our final project. We don't know what it is yet, but it is giving us good ideas for that. And this was fun. This was fun. I wish I could like have this forever and just play when I'm bored. It's fun, and having a little joystick that you can just play little video games on is just cool. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.